So Nirvana were like, spent a lot of the day in the canteen at Limehouse in Wembley, drinking cups of coffee and, moaning that someone had ate all their sandwiches.
Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Stupid And Contagious podcast, episode 6. In this episode, we're going to be talking to Terry Christian from The Word. Well, Luke and Dave will be. I wasn't involved in that interview, but just a quick reminder, if you're listening, then please do leave us a review rating so that other people can find it. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do give it a like, comment below and subscribe to the channel. Anyway, let's get into this week's podcast. So before we get started, Dave, you had some homework that I think you had to listen to Entombed and...
The Lars.
That's it, The Lars, yeah. So go on, what do you reckon?
Well, I did do my homework. The Lars, it was all right.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
It was
Just
all right.
That's it though, isn't it? All right,
Yeah,
is that good enough?
I mean, maybe not, but yeah, I really liked that There She Goes at the time, but I over-listened to it, so that was almost the most annoying track in it.
You had to over-listen to it because there isn't anything else.
But yeah, it was all right.
By the way, if anyone's in the Facebook group, Luke's done an extensive rundown of the whole album, so you can find out exactly what he thinks about every song.
Well, yeah, I felt kind of bad because there was a bit of pushback against it, and I'm no expert, I'm not claiming to be, so I thought I'd go back and listen to it properly and like make notes track by track. So yeah, that's what I did. So if you're interested, there's a post up on the Facebook group about that.
I mean, that's the thing. We don't claim to be experts on music. We just love music. So music's subjective. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. If you do like it, great. Disagree with us.
There's always someone that knows a lot more about you than one particular band, right? Or one particular album or music. And that's an album I hadn't listened to for a long time. I say in the post at the time I did listen to it a lot. It was on in the house like a real lot.
Yeah.
So I wasn't unfamiliar with it, but just never took to it. So
which is fine,
I've tried to give it a fair hearing, basically.
Exactly, that's all we can do. And like we say, if you disagree, that's fine. We haven't got a problem with that. That's the beauty of music; it's subjective, right? So, Dave, what do you think about Entombed?
At first, I thought you were winding me up.
Why?
The record company is Earache Records Limited.
Yeah, they're
right.
classic. They're probably the most famous metal label in the world. Yeah.
The titles of some of the tracks: Abnormally Deceased, Morbid Devourment, Supposed to Rot, Revel
See
in
the pattern
Flesh.
emerging.
It's about they're most about teenage love, aren't they? That's it.
What was impressive, that the musicianship. I mean, it's so fucking fast. But the voice. I mean, do you really enjoy it?
I really do. Yeah.
I tend to agree with Dave on that one. Like, I do like a bit of metal, but the really sort of hard, unintelligible sort of lyric ones, I do struggle with, I have to say.
Right. See,
You can't really...
I see it as part of the music.
Yeah,
You know what I
I
mean?
get that, yeah.
You did ask me. You said something like, try and understand at least what they're doing. And what I think it is it's not just like pop music in that they're trying to create songs. It's like they're trying to create a whole world. It's like escaping to a world, not just to music.
And that's a good thing, isn't it? Especially for the kids listening. That's a good thing, I think.
That makes it more interesting to me. But yeah, the actual sound of the, I can't get into it.
It's really hard to do. Yeah, I get that. That's cool, man. Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that's probably why like metal has remained as like a subculture for so long, because it does create that whole aesthetic and a whole world that you can kind of belong to, right? Which I really like.
Yeah. So that's Dave's homework. Before we go any further, I put this in the Facebook group. I'm just going to read you a nice little review we got on Reddit this week. So here we go. Listen to half of this and it's painfully boring. It's 3 British guys reading the UK music charts from 1990 and saying, yeah, a lot. Don't waste your time. There's nothing insightful or stories about the music whatsoever. Skip it unless you have insomnia and are trying to get to sleep. Pretty good, I thought. You know,
Lots of people do.
That's
Very
true.
true.
That's true.
There's a big audience.
Providing a
there.
service.
got a niche audience there.
I
Again,
so wanted to say yeah.
It's
Then as a
subjective.
response, and I had to
Yeah.
hold myself back.
You know, they could be right. They could be half right on a lot of it. We're not experts. We're just three people who like 90s music. But I do have to caveat that with Luke in particular does a lot of research before each show. So, you know, we do a bit of research beforehand. So,
Not to mention 30 odd years of obsessive music listening and countless books
Exactly
read.
right.
But yeah.
there you go. So, but, you know, we don't expect everyone to like it, but I thought that's quite... Reddit's really territorial anyway. I don't know if any of you have been on there, but...
Yeah.
It's quite a harsh place. So, yeah, let's get into the crux of this week's episode, which is the word. Let's have a chat about the word. So, yeah, if we just have a quick talk about Terry Christian, the man, the legend, Terry Christian, Luke.
Okay, well, most of my information comes from his own book, My Word.
There you go. There's a plug.
Which is quite old now. It's like 2008 or something like that. It came out. So most of the information, 2007. So most of the information I get comes from his view, his side of it. But born in Manchester, 1960. So I guess he's 63, 62, 63. Fourth child of 6 kids, big Irish family in Manchester. Interesting. I was reading a thing just from an interview a couple of years ago. He considers himself ethnically Irish, which is interesting. Grew up in pretty bad poverty, it seems, from the stories told in the book. Identified as a socialist and kind of a member of lots of left-wing groups and stuff from an early age.
Yeah, that comes across on his Twitter page at the moment, really, I think.
So yeah, kind of got into punk as a teenager. He talks about it in the interview, but he said he grew up either on a street where either you were Irish or you were like black, basically. So grew up with a lot of kind of Jamaican music, black music. So he applied biology, but got kicked off his course for bad attendance. So after that, he went back home, was unemployed, managed a reggae band for a bit, did quite a lot of club promotion and stuff like that. Kind of quite famously, he first got on TV as part of a show featuring like unemployed youths of Manchester.
I didn't know that.
This is like in the early 80s, and there were like riots and stuff going on all over the country. And it was like a response to that, like trying to find out, what the youth were disaffected about. And also Johnny Marr from The Smiths was also on the same program.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
And it wasn't just a one-off; it was like a weekly thing over quite a few months by the sound.
I'll have to go back and check it out.
So apparently, became a bit of like a celebrity on that for his performance on that. And
Okay.
from that, he got offered a job on some local radio and did loads of radio work. Was the youngest ever person to win a Sony Award.
Really?
And the first person to ever win 2 Sony Awards. And then in the late 80s, when Manchester, as you insist on it being called, Neil.
Let's just clarify. If you're referring to the city, then Manchester's fine. If you're referring to that specific period of music in Manchester,
that's
it's got to be
exactly what I'm
Manchester.
referring to. That's exactly what I'm referring to. So Manchester kicked off.
You don't have to say it every time.
You got it. It was mad. And Manchester became like, the centre of the music world. I think he was in like the right place at the right time. He basically, at the audition, got offered the job on The Word, and he was there right from the beginning in the planning. And actually The Word started off as a page that he had in the Manchester Evening News. He did
That's
like
right.
a
He
weekly
talks about it in the interview, doesn't he? I think,
and that was where the name came from. That's Terry, basically. Well, up until then.
Do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown on The Word itself for people who
it
didn't
ran
watch
from
it?
1990 to 1995. Started out on a bit earlier, 6 o'clock on a Friday.
That's right, because it replaced the Tube, didn't it, or something?
That's it.
Was it the Tube?
Yeah. And then got moved to 9 p.m. Quite soon after, I think. Although I thought it was later than that.
Oh, it was definitely later than that.
Well, no, we were just young. We were probably just young. We just we thought it was late.
I think it was
Later
11.
I thought it was
by the
later than
end,
9.
Right?
What's the watershed? It had to be after the watershed, didn't it?
Well,
For
that's 9.
Can't believe it was on at 6. Can't have been the same riotous show in the early incarnations that were on at 6, surely.
No,
Can't have
exactly.
So I did a little bit of research before today. I just went on Wikipedia, basically. Yeah, I've just got some notable moments from the show. Obviously, Nirvana, international television debut, where they did "Smells Like Teen Spirit," with Kurt Cobain famously declaring Courtney Love to be the best fuck in the world.
Yeah, man. Do you remember seeing that?
I do remember it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was good, wasn't it?
Unbelievable.
Obviously, there was the L7 performance of Danita Sparks, famously pulling her jeans and underwear down.
Yeah,
Full frontal nudity.
I mean, Dave, do you remember watching these?
Yeah, I remember the L7 one. I must have seen Nirvana, but I don't remember it.
I mean, that L7 one back in the day, we were like young teens, you know, that was...
Yeah, I wonder why I remember that one.
But it did feel really outrageous, didn't it? It was unbelievable. I can't believe it was allowed to be on telly.
But I think it was outrageous. You couldn't do that now, could you?
No, I guess not.
Rage Against the Machine playing Killing in the Name. I think I do remember that. I'm sure I remember that.
I totally
do you remember
it. Yeah, very, very well. Yeah.
I've got some more off the wheel ones here. Lynn Perry, who's best known for her role as Ivy Tilsley in Coronation Street, performed a tuneless rendition of "I Will Survive" by Gloria Gaynor. I think I do remember that.
I think she was famous as well for having botched surgery. She was in the news for having botched facial plastic surgery, allegedly.
Ooh.
Ivy.
There you go. Obviously, there was the very drunk Oliver Reed is doing Wild Thing with Neds Atomic Dustbin, which is a legendary performance. I mean, I'm not sure about the whole Oliver Reed thing. I think it's a bit mean, really, isn't it, to play on someone's struggles for ratings, but...
I don't know, do they engineer it? Maybe.
I don't know. I don't think it
Like
really
when
used
George Best was on Wogan, remember that?
Yeah, at the time, I think if you're going to get Oliver Reed on, you're getting him on for one reason only. They're the only ones on Wikipedia anyway, but there were many, many more. Obviously, the Senseless Things, they were on there. I remember those. Mega City 4. Poplar itself must have been on there. Dinosaur Jr., they did Start Chopping. I remember that one.
Yeah. Really good.
Faith No More.
Faith No More on like 3 times. And Blur were on 3 times as well. They were on super early. But Blur were on with Pop Scene.
Yeah, so many great bands. And obviously their Oasis debut, that came a bit later on, but Oasis Supersonic first ever TV performance.
Again, do you remember it?
I do remember it.
Yeah, I remember
Liam had like an old school camera that he was sort of waving around. I do specifically remember at the time thinking, fucking hell, this is a bit different.
I mean, Liam looks so good there. He looks beautiful. He looks so young.
The arrogance of it, debut TV performance, acting like you're already the biggest band in the world, it was a sign of things to come, wasn't it? It's weird to say that Oasis sound different now, because obviously they've become...
the establishment.
Yeah, but back then it was very different. Beautifully crafted, like pop songs, like Live Forever. It was something completely new, really.
But have you seen... programs now in the same slot that the word was in, like The Last Leg? Have you seen that?
I like The Last Leg, yeah.
It just feels like they're trying to recreate the vibe that the word had, but
problem they've got these days is they've got parameters they have to stick to. They didn't really have them back then, you know. You can't get away with a lot of things these days, rightly or wrongly, on TV, which you could back then.
Yeah, well, do you want to talk about that? Like the I'll do anything to get on TV shit. That was...
But yeah, I do remember that. It was pretty awful.
it's coming back in it on bloody TikTok.
Is it?
Live,
Right,
talking
it's like the
about
TikTok
doing
challenge.
anything to get on
fucking
TV
TikTok
or a
Live.
screen.
Me, Luke and Dave have spent a bit of time on TikTok Live because it's just mad. Anyone who hasn't experienced TikTok Live yet should go and have a look. It's just fucking mental. It's just people doing nothing.
There's nothing mental about that. It's boring.
I know,
It's
but that's
boring as
what's
fuck.
mental about it, isn't it?
I wrote in my notes that it was like a forerunner to YouTube, but you might be right. TikTok might be a better comparison than YouTube.
I remember the bloke snogging the old lady. I think everyone remembers that one.
Did I think I remember somebody, they got someone to drink salt water, then puke in a glass and then drink their own puke. Is that
Sounds
right?
like it. It's probably.
I'm sure
That-
it's right. I'm sure I
Fuck.
vaguely
Yeah.
remember that.
That's horrible, right?
I don't think Terry Christian was responsible for those.
No, I think he talks about this as well. I think that was
He
the
does in the book
producers
as well.
and stuff.
He wasn't into it. Yeah.
But they had some good presenters. They apart from Terry Christian, they had Mark Lamar, didn't they? He was pretty good on that.
It's pretty funny.
Katie
Katie Puckrick. I
Puckrick,
liked
that
her.
was it.
She was funny. Yeah.
Amanda de
Amanda de
Cadenet, she
Cadenet.
was quite good. Good one, Dave. Nearly as good as Natalie Umbrella.
Say it again, Dave.
Go
I think
on.
I missed it.
Amanda de Cabinet.
I had loads. I mean, I won't say them all because I talked to Terry about them in the interview. But one I didn't mention, I think, was Smashing Pumpkins doing Disarm. Do you remember that?
No, I don't. But that's my favourite Smashing Pumpkins song.
Oh man,
believe I missed
I
that
watched
one.
it again yesterday. It's really incredible. It's like really powerful. It's
you
great.
like Billy Corgan, don't you? Big fan.
I wasn't the biggest Smashing Pumpkins fan, to be honest. Although I do like some of their songs. But Disarm is it's an amazing song, and I think
Have you
that's
seen?
probably like the best live performance I've seen on there. Really,
I might have seen it. But I definitely love that song. I'll check it out. But have you seen any of Billy Corgan's interviews of late? I think you'd hate him even more.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's even.
I haven't.
more
I
of an
haven't.
old-
I can guess though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Elaborate quickly.
To be fair, Smashing Pumpkins are a very well respected and esteemed band, right? He just won't let anyone ever forget that. He loves Smashing Pumpkins more than anyone else. Well, himself is Smashing Pumpkins, and I think
Why
that's the
not?
issue.
I thought you were going to say he's turned into some right-wing nut job or something.
Oh no, he's no Morrissey, no.
Lemonhead's doing Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah, that's
really
right.
good, really
Great.
grunged up, like fucking full-on distorted guitar
That's
version.
right. I'd forgotten about that one, but yeah, really good.
Evan Dando changing the words to any way you look at it, you're fucked. Again,
Yeah,
it was
'cause,
outrageous. Right?
That's
So
the other
good.
thing. Like, it was totally live. They all sounded great as well. Something about that environment, and all the kids were close to the stage, weren't they? It was really sort
Yeah.
of.
Oh
intimate.
man, I so wanted to be in that audience.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd probably been too young, but yeah, it
Yeah.
looked fun.
Cypress Hill, Tricky, just
Yeah.
really, memorable ones for me.
Yeah, just a great show, you know. I was going to say we used to watch it when we came back from the pub, but that's bollocks because we weren't going to the pub. We were 13. I can't remember.
Yeah, but we
must
started
have
going to
been
the pub when we were 15. So it went for 5 years. So we're 2 years watching at home.
pre-pub. I think we all used to go for a wander around Seaford, didn't we, of an evening?
Yeah, pop into the graveyard, go to the Crouch.
Yeah, you know, hang
The
out.
sneaky cigs. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when we got home, put on the Word, didn't it? It can't have been 9. It must have been later than that.
Definitely was 11 till 12.
Dave, have you got any memorable performances you wanted to mention before we go into the interview with Terry?
One thing I remember is Mark Lamar taking the piss out of MC Hammer, and I think it was funny then, but looking back now, I don't find that funny now. That was one thing I remember that you haven't mentioned.
Hang on, why not? Why is it not funny now?
Well, yeah.
You say it as if.
Just so rude.
I think that was the point of the show. Wasn't it? Although I have made the point about Oliver Reed. I
Stop.
guess it's a similar.
Hammer time.
Aye. Well, you thought he was a bit rude to MC Hammer.
At the time, it was funny, but looking at the clip now, it's just insulting to the guy. Have you seen it?
Oh man, Hammer forgives him. He's a man of God, man. It's fine. He forgives him.
Why was it that bad?
Well, take a look.
It was quite car crash TV, a lot of the interviews, wasn't it?
We remember the music, like reading the book, like he talks about like the insane amount of like Hollywood actors he was, being sent over to LA to interview and stuff like that. And these crazy stories he got up to doing like that kind of outside the studio stuff. Seems to be like the main thing behind the show, but we just remember like the bands in the studio, right?
And the bands as well. They interviewed all the bands. I remember a really sort of awkward interview with Faith No More as well on there. That was the show, wasn't it? It was just, it was all quite spontaneous.
It's like this podcast, isn't it?
A bit. We'll see what the people on Reddit say after this one.
Yeah, here's the interview with when Luke and I met Terry Christian.
Oh, and if you're watching on YouTube, apologies, but Terry's video camera wasn't working, but you are able to see me and Dave. So thanks for coming on. I thought in case we forget to talk about it later or we run out of time, let's start with your stand-up tour that's coming up. Can you tell us a bit about it and what people can expect from that?
Yeah, well, I've done about 10 shows. So it's called The Word is Terry Christian, the Naughty 90s and More. It's a slight dig, but it's more about the 90s, about that feel, you know, because if you think about how divisive things are now, and, you know, obviously the start of the 90s, it was still very much Thatcherism. It was still this idea that you were a bit of an outcast being a young person. I suppose that's still the case now. And the idea was to make a youth program that, unlike youth programs that had come before The Word, they'd all been a little bit, oh God, it sounds terrible to say it, but they'd all been a bit glib middle class, hadn't they? It'd all been a bit, kind of overly aspirational, like Magenta Divine in a designer shades and, Network 7, where they're all walking around in design, leather trousers and what have you. And the sort of pretend concern about, different aspects. And really, all I could think of, I always felt that, being young or being a youth, in inverted commas, was that weird gap between, I cheekily described it, between infancy and adultery, and I just thought, well, so really when I thought about myself, age 14, 15, I just couldn't wait to be old enough to go out and drink underage. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't wait to be able to go out. And so the idea of The Word was we developed it into a show that we basically bought a night out into your front room if you were like 14, 15, 16. So that was the idea of it, basically. And to do the stand-up show now, because obviously I had quite a tragic life. I had an upbringing that was too character building, so it lends itself very well to comedy. And I did a comedy tour years ago called Naked Confessions of a Recovering Catholic, which was about that, growing up Irish descent in inner city Manchester back in the 60s and 70s. And that did really well, but I knew that people who were buying tickets weren't coming to see me talking about, being terrorized by nuns. They wanted to know about The Word. So I used to do a Q&A afterwards, and this show developed from the Q&A, but it should have been touring back in 2020, but the pandemic and all the rest of it, because I had a 17-day tour lined up and that all had to be cancelled. Then it was redone again, and that had to be cancelled. I would have ended up like with, one socially distanced gig. That's what I would have ended up with at the end. So I started again, and it's slowly building up. So I've only done 10 shows so far, but they've all been absolutely fantastic. Really good, especially the last 3. So it's going in the right direction. It's just getting them more regularly because I'm doing it all on my own at the moment.
Yeah. Have you got many left?
Standards. Hey?
Is the tour going on, or is it upcoming?
Oh, yeah. Really, it's upcoming. So I've done 10 gigs, and then I've got 1 in July, Bath Comedia. Then I've got 3 in August. And then, it's like 2 a week from September through to December. And then there'll be even more in January. But it's just the way it's worked out. If I had my way, I'd be doing them now, because I'm quite excited about it. And the more you do it, the more it kind of builds up and gets better, But yeah, it's nice and twisted. It's got its Frankie Boyle type moments. It's got great clips. And it's got, some confessional stuff in too. So it's got that 90s vibe. It's like a night out. It's a Friday night type show.
Yeah, I was the exact target audience, I think. Was it 91 it came out, The Word, or was it?
No, 1990.
90, yeah.
But you can't over intellectualize these things. You go on feeling. So I'd done 8 years of radio, so I knew that had worked because I'd won a couple of National Sony Radio Awards for the best specialist music show. So I could bring that knowledge into it. Plus, there were always music magazine shows. So I'd interview guests, even people who'd written books. It was much more Radio 4 than The Word. I can tell you that now. In fact, one of the downfalls of The Word was the lack of imagination of the other people who worked on it, where the sort of higher ups, because they weren't that experienced. And then the people who were coming in new, who were like, good fun and everything, but it was basically a YTS scheme for ex-public schoolboys. It was just really odd to me.
That's yeah. I was going to ask about
Diversity
that.
meant, diversity sort of meant Oxford and Cambridge. It was it was really
How
odd.
bad was it? I mean, you talk about it a lot in your book as well. I mean, how bad was it?
Well, it was just unbelievable. I mean, I wasn't a young guy. I was like 29 when I started working with them all. I'm going, what? And I'd been working in the media since 1981 for the BBC. So I knew all about the Oxbridge thing and the glass ceiling. And, even back in the day, Radio 1, it was all very public school. Even John Peel, he got a Millfield public school. But to actually step in there with all these young people and to think, oh, my God, Rugby, Harrow, Uppingham, Westminster, St. Paul's, Rodine, you know what I mean? It was like, there was none of it like your minor ones. It was all like your big public schools.
Wow.
And it was quite amusing. It did feel a bit Downton Abbey to me. I felt a bit like, even though I had 8 years of experience, even if you're like discussing what band we were going to have on that week, it'd be like, they'd look at you as if you were the gardener speaking out of turn, going, well, I think we should plant the roses this April, a little bit earlier this year, Squire. Oh,
so how did you slip through the net and get the gig then?
Well, because Manchester was hit, wasn't it, for like 6 months,
true,
or a year, and it was almost as if, because I mean that was a strange thing, if you think about this is like 1990, really,
Well,
those
Manchester,
but those sort of shows had never really had anybody with a northern accent presenting them. You get the odd Scouser in like Network 7, like Trevor Ward. That'll be it. Outside of a drama series or a stand-up comedian, you wouldn't hear a northern accent on TV. So it was, and the same on radio. I mean, one of the reasons I actually went for the audition with The Word was because I wasn't getting the good radio gigs I thought I deserved, given my CV. And it was kind of, I had no nerves about the audition because I thought there's no chance of them giving me this job, not an accent like mine. And there was the reality was, I think I got the job because I was from Manchester and I had a Mancunian accent. So but obviously they had to balance that up suddenly and find the poshest girl they could, to put alongside me in Amanda de Cadenet, which is, a sort of obvious cynicism about it, really. And then they threw us both under the bus whenever they could.
What do you mean by that?
Well, even from day one. I mean, when before The Word came on air in August 1990, so they looked for a female presenter to present alongside me, and they'd given me the job in February. But I had to keep hush about it until we started filming in May. And even then, I don't think Amanda was taken on until the end of July. And the number of women we auditioned for it. But there was a woman that I'd worked with in Manchester, and I kept saying, look, she's fantastic, really funny, blah, blah, blah. And I just got, Terry, sorry about this. Terry, we can't have two people from Manchester on the same show. And I'm going, well, why? Well, I mean, it's just, and it was that whole thing at the time. All the research has shown that audiences, particularly in the South, didn't like Northern accents. Wow. And whenever I said, well, surely they'll get used to me, I'd get that kind of slightly quizzical look as if, what if your first taste of curry was a Vindaloo? Do you know what I mean? And it was like, so it was one of those. Wow. And it's a shame. And then this same woman who had worked with in Manchester, I suggested her for series 2, when they took Katie Puckrick on. And they wouldn't even audition her again. And then series 3, they did audition her for The Big Breakfast. But I always think that Carolina Hearn would have been a great co-host on The Word, don't you?
Oh wow, that's who you're talking about. Oh wow.
Yes.
And they
Wow.
wouldn't even talk to her.
Well, because it's just one of those crazy things. They weren't
The
really
fuck?
talent spotters.
Yeah.
Don't forget, I'd done 8 years of
Yeah.
doing my own show and having to find people that were good. You know, every week to me, it was like I was like Yul Brynner out of the Magnificent Seven, trying to find another gunslinger. You know, so
Wow.
it was by invite only to be a contributor to my radio shows. You know, that won the Sony Awards. You know, people like Devon Daly, who ended up being Trevor Nelson's producer on Radio 1 for 4 years. You know, the guys who did the reggae slot for me. Henry Normal was my resident poet, you know, who ended up running Baby Cow Pictures and writing the script and directing and producing, as well as doing the royal family and everything else, and Mrs. Merton. He also did Philomena, didn't he? And all the stuff with Steve Coogan.
Oh right.
You know,
Yeah.
Baby Cow. And he was from Nottingham. So I was using him when I was at Radio Derby. And then when I went to Manchester, he came back in as my resident poet, but then he was really busy doing all the comedy stuff, you know, in Manchester. He started the whole of the comedy scene in Manchester up, you know, the modern one, that Caroline Aherne, Steve Coogan, you know, Bob Dillinger should have done a lot better, Elvis Presley, all these guys came out of, you know, John Thompson, and then even Peter Kay, you know, because that was the first opportunity. That was when the doors were blown open and there was an actual scene for that in Manchester. And Henry did that, and then I replaced him as my resident poet on Key 103 with a guy called Lem Cisse. Whatever happened to him?
Yeah.
You know, Lem, where's he gone now? So it was, you know, this is one of my frustrations when I worked on the Word. It's like, you know, they just didn't listen to it. I used to have better guests, especially towards like series 5 of the Word. I'd have better guests on a Tuesday night on my show on Key 103 in Manchester than we'd have on a Friday, you know, because there wasn't that, how can I put it? There wasn't that sort of raw knowledge there. And it all became a bit about, oh, look, we've got 3 columns in a paper talking about the show. But I thought, yeah, but they're not talking about anything good about the show. All they're doing is banging on still about me being thick and my northern accent. You know what I mean? How hopeless whoever the other presenters are. And
the idea that Southerners don't like Northern accents. I mean, where did that come from? I mean, they must have made that research up.
No, it was kind of it was some sort of weird. It would show up in research, but it's almost like the way they ask the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they go, "Oh no, I don't." You know, as a rule, I don't. I mean, it was strange because most people from the north, even back in my day, we'd all been down south at some point, you know, whether it was, you know, watching United or whatever. Southerners, again, outside of being football fans, hadn't really been to the north. The rave scene kind of changed that a bit, and probably the Northern Soul scene before that, if you go back to the 70s. But there was there wasn't, you know, I mean, it's strange how a lot of our phrases are now appearing like Southern speak, you know, like describing an attractive woman as fit or an attractive bloke as fit. Because when I went to Polytechnic in London in 1978, I remember like there was saying, "Oh, she's quite fit," and I said, "Well, I think she does play a lot of squash." Mate, mate. But again, it came out of that rave scene. You know, certain phrases got passed around. You know, so the culture spreads. And so I think it would have changed more in your era than in mine. You know, I noticed it. You know, I noticed London become quite a friendly place, to be fair. You know, compared to what it used to be like. Yeah, you know, I imagine a lot less dangerous place, even though there's a lot of stabbings going on there. But I mean, it was well rough when I went down there. I used to change buses going from Averill College, where I stayed in halls of residence in Elton, which is a teacher training college. You know, but I was at Thames Poly in Woolwich, and I used to change buses where Stephen Lawrence got stabbed.
Oof.
You know, getting the 122 to Woolwich, and there was an estate the back of Elton Well Hall that was full of kind of NF British movement types then and Millwall fans. And my best mate at Poly, he was from Wallington in Surrey, and he was half Indian, but had like hair down his backside, you know, like a hippie. So I'd be like quite tense with him, and lads eyeing him up, and I'd like going, "Who are you looking at, mate?" Because that was an advantage to being northern back in those days. You did sound a bit more aggressive to them than a normal person.
just get onto the words. So like Dave was saying, I think me and Dave, we went to school together, basically. We've been mates since school. So we were like pretty much I was thinking we might be too young for the demographic, but from what you said, I think we were the perfect demographic. We were
I was
13
that
to
was
18
my Friday night
basically.
out. I was too young to go out when it started, but I was
Yeah,
allowed to
and it
watch
felt
the Word.
naughty. And it felt kind of illicit that we were watching it. And then by the time we were 15, 16 going out, we would come back from the pub and watch it in that spirit as well. So we got like both worlds, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, that was the idea of it, because when we were coming up for the template of it, I had a radio show at the time, and my kind of sidekick, this was a late night radio show, 10 to 1 on KFM with Carolina Hearn and Craig Cash. You know, they worked there as well. And my sidekick was John Ronson. He did all right as well, didn't he?
He did.
John Ronson.
He did.
So if you think about the talented people I'd worked with, what happened to them when I went on to national telly? So we do sort of quite weird stuff. So one of the things that we did was I'd say to John Ronson to play the Mission Impossible music. Remember, he's a cassette player. You know, I had it on a cassette. Mission Impossible, you know, all the sort of TV themes. And I'd like give him something stupid to do. So I'd say, right, John, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to go out and find out if there's such a thing as God. so then he'd just waffle on. You know, and go off at a tangent, but very funny. And then at the end, I'd say, so, John, is there a God? And he'd go, well, we just don't know. So obviously, Charlie Parsons liked that, but he used it as the gossip strand. But then John Ronson then came back and actually did a show called The Ronson Mission, which is a little bit like what Louis Theroux did later on. But his first kind of forays into TV and writing for national papers was The Word, because he was auditioned for The Word, and then he was the only journalist allowed in to watch the actual pilot show of The Word, John Ronson, which he reviewed in the newly formed Independent and slagged it off. Oh, wow. But it was quite funny, you know, because on pain of death, he was only allowed to do it because me and this other girl who knew him, we begged them to let him. Come on, do him a favor, blah, blah, blah. He won't say anything negative. It's only a pilot. And he basically said,
and he did.
I
mean, like, how conscious were you that you were kind of shaping young people like us, identity and their lives and their consciousness? And, you know, Monday morning at school, everyone would be talking about the bands that played and some outrageous things people did for getting on TV and shit like that.
That was the idea, you know, because I remember I was that punk generation. So I was in the same class at primary school and then went to secondary school. St. Bede's in Manchester. There's only 4 of us from our primary school, which is a big Catholic primary school in Old Trafford. John Marr out of Buzzcocks, and I remember him leaving when around sort of April, May time when we were in the lower 6 to go with the Buzzcocks full time. And then in my class at St. Bede's was a lad called Chris Nagel, who ended up the engineer, who kind of worked on Unknown Pleasures. He ended up the engineer, worked on Unknown Pleasures, then became a producer, worked with New Order. But he was basically the one who did all the work for Martin Hannett, because Martin Hannett, you know, is famously produced all the Factory stuff, was often off his head on heroin and not able to do it. So we had Chris Nagel in my class. The year below was Andy Connell out of Swing Out Sister in a Certain Ratio. Then in our Kev's class was Paul Hanley out of the Fall, in his year. Then in our Tony's year, and he was like 7 years older than me, was Rob Gretton. He was the guy who managed New Order and Joy Division and came up with the idea of the Hacienda. He was a real music man at Factory Records. And then, of course, you had that just in the area I grew up in, Old Trafford. If you drew a 1/4-mile radius from my house, you would get all the black groups in Manchester, you know, so you get people like MC Busby, you get, Martin Sugar Merchant out of Audio Web, Denise Johnson, Marcel King out of Sweet Sensation. They were the first black British group to get number 1 in the charts. You had, Ruthless Rap Assassins, then MC Tunes. Then you also had all the guys out of Easter House, Ivor Perry, you know, who replaced Johnny Marr in the Smiths originally. The only reason the Smiths split up was Morrissey found that because Ivor Perry was as hard as nails, and Morrissey found that he couldn't kind of boss or get Ivor Perry to be very compromising when writing songs, and so he wanted to sack him, but was too scared of him because he only lived across the road in the same council estate as him. So he asked Mike Joyce, who's the big drummer, the strong one, can you go and sack Ivor Perry? And tell him he's sacked. And Mike Joyce said, I'm not going to tell Ivor Perry that. You're joking. Kick me head in. So in the end, he split the Smiths up.
Oh wow!
And that was the only way he could get rid of Ivor Perry. But so with John Marr, then Ian Curtis, his grandparents lived 2 streets away from me, on Stamford Street in Old Trafford, and that's where he'd stay when he was away. I mean, even now, moving on, there's loads of people from around that area. That sort of weird little Circle of Hume, Moss Side, Old Trafford, Whalley Range. There's just so much stuff, and very diverse stuff, even in the days when it wasn't seen. People like Rachel McFarlane, Dan Charlemagne, who sang with Moby, and also she sang with Goldie and Urban Cookie Collective, The Key to Secret. So that was almost like a Manchester black supergroup, and most of them live around our way. But Dan Charlemagne, God rest her soul, was fantastic. And it's weird with the black artists; they're often not marketed as being from Manchester. So even people like Rachel McFarlane, who's a great kind of gospel style singer who sang with like Loveland, come on, grab somebody, let the music lift you up. They were an all Manchester band, Loveland. But LMC, Take Me to the Clouds Above, got to #1. That was her from sort of, Levenshulme area. And Lee Monteverdi from Moston, the Lee Monteverdi Collective, LMC. And it doesn't get the recognition because the people who are writing about Manchester aren't from those areas. They're always either from Stockport or from down south. And they come up to Manchester as students, and they virtually avoid that area. They avoid that kind of, they said, that's not really what I've come up here for. And that's why they'd always tell these lies about Manchester being an indie city. It's always been a pop city. Anyone who sounds indie-ish in Manchester, it's almost by accident, because they're trying to create their own version of pop. Smiths wanted to be on top of the pops. Even the Fall wanted to be on top of the pops more than Hucknall out of Simply Red. That was their thing.
Yeah,
they wouldn't turn it down. So it was interesting, and we had like in that punk era, we had shows like Revolver with Peter Cook that would be on at 6 o'clock on a Saturday, and you'd have like reggae bands like Merger on and Steel Pulse and Blondie. The first TV of Blondie and the Stranglers. And, the 999 and odd stuff like that. And then, of course, we had Tony Wilson doing So It Goes. He went out at different times across all the ITV regions. Sunday night in Granada at about 10:30. Just amazing. Ian Dury and the Blockheads, Elvis Costello, The Clash at the Electric Circus, the Sex Pistols, Steel Pulse again, the first time, I ever saw them on the TV, and then went to see them a week later. At Manchester Poly, probably the greatest British reggae band ever. They were all from Handsworth in Birmingham. So I wanted to create that vibe and that excitement that you're going to see something new and different on this show, in terms of music. And that's why a lot of the arguments on the show behind the scenes were always about music. It was kind of, well, this is what we've got to get on. Why have we got this shit on? Because, there was a phase where there wasn't that much around, but it was that they thought they were on a hip show now so that they could make it hipper. And I go, mate, you've got to understand this. Well, it's a new scene in London. I go, listen, if you get 400 people dancing to a certain type of music in London on a Thursday night, it's called a scene. If you get 400 types of people dancing to a certain sort of music in Manchester, it's called a night out. It doesn't, it's all made up. Yeah. So we had this whole acid jazz thing, where it was like, bands like Corduroy and Mother Earth and that. And it wasn't that they were bad, but it was just never going to take off. There's a load of white lads with goatee beards wearing Frank Spencer berets playing old 70s funk. Do you know what I mean? Now, I know what old 70s funk sounds like, and it sounded better than them.
Yeah.
And and it wasn't a scene. It wasn't anything that created some massive excitement outside of London. And it was just their desperation to be hip, new wave of new wave. And a lot of that was based on this thing where London hadn't really had a kind of organic scene since punk in 76. So there was that desperation again, because, they'd always try and invent scenes like Rare Groove, where the records were neither rare. Well, they certainly weren't that rare. You know what I mean? Very few of the records on the rare groove scene would have cost you over a tenner. And again, and the big tunes in that rare groove scene were always played at nights out anyway. You know, whether it was the Jackson Sisters, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so it was interesting to go into that and say it's not about being hip or trendy. It's about just getting good stuff out, and it's not even
One thing that we talk about a lot on this podcast is kind of the push and pull between the UK and the US kind of bands at the time. And it seemed the Word got quite a good balance between kind of American bands and UK bands. Was that a deliberate thing that you did?
Oh, yeah, because all your influences, even growing up in Manchester, were like American. You know, in the punk era, we like the Sex Pistols, we like the Clash, we like Buzzcocks. Really, forget it after that for like, you know, British bands. After that, it was all the American bands that were like, you know, like Talking Heads and, you know, sort of same with, you know, with soul music, funk music. I mean, Manchester was built on soul music. You know, the phrase Northern Soul was invented about the tunes that were played at the Twisted Wheel by a bloke from Deptford, funnily enough, Dave Godin, as a political statement, really. And he did it to stop the hush-puppied mafia, you know, in London from trying to define what the scene was and take it over. Because he thought, well, if I call it Northern Soul, you know, which just meant rare soul, it was just you know, anything with a 4/4 beat or higher. If I call it Northern Soul, the minute they go in to try and take it over, they'll be eyed with suspicion. Who are you hush puppies? You know what I mean? Coming from down south up here. And it's because a lot of the clubs in the Midlands and the North didn't, you know, still stayed true to that soul stuff because people wanted to dance and take drugs and stay up all night, you know, for 8 hours. So it kept moving around. I mean, it was still popular in London, you know, the 100 Club and all along that south coast, like Brighton and, you know, weird places like Cornwall, Devon. You know, these are all big, you know, big homes for like, you know, rare soul. The mod scene was a continuity of that. But yeah, I mean, it was to have that vibe, to have that raw music knowledge out there. I mean, it's weird. I wanted us to do something on Northern Soul on the Word, and I kept pushing and pushing for it, you know, just to film it an all-nighter, to see these characters, you know, it was like a real organic scene. And I remember Barbara Aitken was playing at Ashton-under-Lyne in Manchester, a big like Northern Soul with Barbara Aitken, who did the original Am I the Same Girl and loads of other stuff, you know, sort of almost semi-hits, and they wouldn't do it. And yet, when they did decide to do a piece on Northern Soul, they sent Danny Bear up to Blackpool to interview a butcher who collected records, which wasn't used in the end.
But for us, go on.
Well, it's an eternal frustration of mine, you know, the missed opportunities because of the lack of imagination and kind of trying to second guess the audience too much. Because the idea is you get something interesting and make it more interesting. When often what we were doing was getting something that was quite boring and trying to make it seem really outrageous and interesting when it actually wasn't that. You know, they do these shoots and try and create these false middle, beginning, middle, and ends. You know, and you go, well, you know, here's a bloke. You know, I remember sending Katie out to interview Jeff Stryker, and the only what was interesting about him, he's got a massive cock. That's it. And he's just gone, this next bloke's got a massive cock. There you go. There's a picture of him. Let's move on.
That
was basically my introduction on the night.
There you go. That's all you need to know. For us, like especially like the American bands, it seemed pretty exciting for us because there's no other way to see them except for, you know, reading about them in the NME. So to have them like beamed directly into our rooms, it seemed.
Would they not have played exciting in the area where you grew up in?
I mean, not really. We were in Brighton, well, along the coast from Brighton. No, there weren't that many like American bands you could go and see. No, we were like 14.
To Wembley,
you know.
Ah, right, yeah. Oh, you mean as up and coming? Yeah.
Yeah, they were especially like the up and coming bands like Dinosaur Jr. and like Rage Against the Machine and stuff. It just seemed like so
Nirvana.
exciting.
Nirvana played about a year before at Manchester Poly, at the old Polytechnic. You know what I mean? So
those kind of notorious, those kind of performances have almost kind of passed into folklore and legend now, right? You know, like Kurt, you know, declaring Courtney the best fuck in the world and all of that, and Oasis's debut, whatever, you know, Neds and Oliver Reed, they're kind of almost part of like the fabric of kind of folklore of indie music. Well, for nerds like me. I mean,
Well, we had
did
Ned's Atomic Dustbin on a couple of times,
Yeah.
so they just didn't just do the Oliver Reed thing. Are they called Spares now?
Oh, are they? I don't know.
Yeah,
I think...
a couple of them are in a band called Spares.
Okay, well, hopefully we're going to speak to them soon. So maybe, okay.
Yeah. Although they might be coming back as Ned's Atomic Dustbin, but yeah. So anything that was going on, like.
But did you feel like you were
Sex
witnessing these like little pieces of history, or did it just feel like another?
Not really.
Another
It was basically to try and not miss out on anything that was good, and and across all genres if we could.
That was going to say about that. Yeah, because you had like indie bands, but you had like Sepultura and you had Tricky and like Cypress Hill and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, we'd have one black band on every week, and that was something.
And that was a deliberate strategy.
Well, that was my thing, because I'd always done shows where at least a third of the music was black music. I managed a reggae band back in the 80s. I grew up on a street where you were basically Irish descent and Jamaican, so it was coming through my walls, from being a kid. And then all our older brothers were into what were called raries, and then became known as Northern Soul. So they were all soul heads. When you went to the local youth clubs, it would always be soul, unless you went to the Hideaway in Moss Side, when it was all like reggae and heavy dub and stuff like that. So yeah, we grew up with that. And what I remember is like, you wouldn't go in each other's houses, in those sort of working class areas much. Do you know what I mean? You were only allowed in the hall. You never went in a living room until you were in your teens or whatever. Yeah. But it was quite funny. You go in the hallway, if it was raining outside, and play topsies, with like football cards or Batman cards, on the lino, sort of the oilcloth, because that'd be polished and stuff.
Yeah.
But I can remember, if you're in like any black mates' houses, and one in particular where they get so excited if anyone black came, and they'd get called into the living room. You'd be left in the hall with your Batman cards. Well, they rushed into the living room because Kenny Lynch was on the Val Doonican show. You know what I mean? Just the excitement of seeing somebody who looked like them. And obviously, it's not a hardship to say, right, we have at least one black band on a week. The weirdest one was when 1 week they couldn't come up with anybody, and I said, well, what about Living Colour? And it's not really my kind of, that sort of rock thing, because I'm a punk. We were proper musical fascists. Anything that existed twanging guitars before 76, we would not allow ourselves to even consider music. We weren't listening to Black Sabbath or Led Zepp. Forget that. And so I suggested them, and they were doing really well. I think the lead singer was only like 23, all black rock band from New York or whatever. And I remember like one of the producers going, yeah, but Terry, they're not really black enough, are they? And I said, well, what colour are they? What colour are they? Well, no, but it's like one of them. And I said, well, what colour are they? Because, the whole point to me was the fact they've got brown skin. You know what I mean?
People can see people that look like them, yeah.
It doesn't matter about the genre. And then and then he went, well, they're not urban enough. To which, and I haven't done me neuro-linguistic programming then, I've had therapy. To which I replied, mate, you're about as urban as a second home in Tuscany. I didn't make myself very popular, I have to say, down the line.
Well, there's also a really good gender balance as well. You had like Veruca Salt, Huggy Bear, one of my favorite performances. Again, was that a deliberate thing?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you called it, and then we have Belly on, didn't we, with Tanya Donnelly, who'd been in. She'd been in Throwing Muses as well, hadn't she?
Yeah.
Tanya Donnelly, yeah. So, and I think we had Kristin Hirsch as well as a solo artist too later on. Huggy Bear was a weird one, because that was in that little pocket of 1.5 series when Joe Wiley was on the show, and I'd got the job because I hated the guy who was the music booker of our first series, and I'd worked with Joe on a Radio 4 show, and I knew that she was into kind of indie stuff and all the rest of it. But Huggy Bear only got on because I think 2 of the girls lived with is it Hugh Everett, the guy who was the assistant editor of the Melody Maker. So they had
something Everett.
Yeah. So they hadn't actually done much. They were massively hyped. They were getting free, front covers when they. I think even that Her Jazz only sold about 3,000 copies, and then they had then they had their staged middle class riot, didn't they, in the studio? What the hell? With some bloke, shouting at me, and I'm going, mate, you want to sort your drummer in that band out. He's dragging about half a yard behind everyone else. I mean, I didn't think they were a great performance. It was a bit too staged, and it was one
really?
of those.
That's interesting. Yeah,
we went through a phase, I think, of like allowing the and I think Joe felt a responsibility, because I remember saying to Joe, I said, forget the enemy, let them follow us. We can get in there before them. They've written a little article, because I remember, even with bands like the Stone Roses, they didn't even get a proper piece in the NME until after they played the Empress Ballroom in Blackpool. Do you know what I mean? Until kind of the Spike Island era, even though they'd have an album that had gone straight in the, the top 40. But, so the music press often push stuff that isn't that good, because they want to bathe in the reflected glow of glory. So, we wrote about them. If they don't write about them, they become big. They hate them.
Right, because they weren't there for. Well, the Word was just ridiculously good at that, right? Oasis, Nirvana, the list goes on of people.
Yeah, but it wasn't easy. It was. I mean, you've got to remember, I'd won 2 National Sony Awards, working in radio for 8 years, doing that, playing demo tapes. Playing music across every genre. Reggae, hip hop, house, all of it. Early adopters of it all, because of the people that I had contributing, coming on the show.
Yeah.
I didn't go on the mic and do it. I said, right, Devon, what have you got this week? He said, we've got a brand new one from Slave, and then there's this new stuff coming out of New York at the moment called Garage. You know what I mean? And then he'd explain what it was, because he was active on the jazz funk all day scene. And likewise, I'd like the Culture Sound System from Derby, and they'd be buying all the reggae pre's. So they knew what what the big tunes were, the different styles that were coming in from the dance hall. So I'd learn all of that. So then to come onto the Word and even have to argue for 8 weeks to get Oasis on, I used to find it quite I found it quite tiresome.
Why didn't they want to get Oasis on?
Because we already had a band from Manchester called the Caliphs booked on. So I had that one again. I mean, Terry, you can't have 2 bands from Manchester on the same show. You know what I mean? It's like, well, so you wouldn't have 2 bands from London on the same show. Well, that's different. I said, yeah, you've not had a music scene since punk. There's nothing that's come out of London.
So they could have been on 2 months earlier? Is that what you're saying?
No. We had to wait for the first single. And in fact, one of the things was when Supersonic came out.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually officially released for another 2 or 3 weeks after we had them on. We got them on the very last show of Series 4. And the other band with the Caliphs, they'd been signed for quite a lot of money, and they were like all Asian lads, all Pakistani descent lads from Manchester. Rolling with the Clicker, I think, is the track that they did, but they were tipped to go for big things. But never quite happened, and we only ended up getting Oasis on. I actually got Noel and Liam to come down to Mither, our music booker, and have him pressed up in a corner. I said, right, because they were rehearsing in London. I said, right. Well, because I was under a lot of pressure, because my ex-missus, mother of my kids, she worked Oasis. She also broke the Stone Roses. She was one of the top promoters of records for radio and TV in the country. She was from Preston, and Louise Jones, who was Noel Gallagher's living girlfriend, at India House, worked for her. And then also she worked all the mute stuff. So of course she worked in Spiral Carpets when Noel was the roadie for them. So I was under a lot of domestic pressure to get them on anyway. But it was unbelievable. The band that they never put on because they were too busy with the Mother Earths and the corduroys and all that kind of stuff was the Cranberries.
Oh wow!
With Linger. So we missed out on the Cranberries with Linger. And I remember when we had the 20th anniversary of the Word, the guy had been the music booker at the time. He said, "Have you got any regrets?" He said, "Yes, not booking the Cranberries." And I went, "Yeah, well, you were just being arseholes." It was like, because I wanted on. But that was the reality. That was all it was. It was the Downton Abbey thing. We can't have them dictating to us. That councillor said, chappy. And there was a touch of that all the time. You know what I mean? And it is weird, like how you get written out the music side of a show like that. And yet my whole background was that. But my first press release for the Word, that was the official one, they'd left all of that out. So they'd left out the fact that I'd done 8 years of radio and won these Sony awards and managed bands and managed nightclubs and all the rest
Knew
of it.
your shit.
Yeah, they put ex-DJ and sheet metal worker. I was never a sheet metal worker. I'd never done a normal job. But they did say, is there not one thing you've done, Terry, that isn't to do with the media? You know, and I've been working in the media since I was 21.
And you weren't working class enough in your job.
Well, no, it wasn't that. Well, you see, I just thought they got it wrong. I said, I did 3 weeks' work to pay off a gas bill once in the sort of summer of 1988 when I was in between jobs. And I had quite a big gas bill. Bloody hell, can you imagine it now? I've been working till next year. And so I worked at the Dormer warehouse in Salford, picking sheets off a line, you know, sheets and curtains off a line to fill orders. And they turned that into an ex-sheet metal worker. But obviously what it was...
Close enough.
Was the people running the Word. Now when you look back on it, they'd never been involved in anything successful in the past because the Word got the slot for Club X. It was the working title was Club X2. So I'd given them the title off the evening news page I'd done, which was called The Word, where you covered up and coming bands from the Manchester area, you know, and what gigs were on and, you know, reviewed demo tapes. I'd suggested that as the name of the show for cynical motives. And then, of course, if the show was a success, they'd go, oh, that guy, he's been quite successful in his past anyway. No wonder he's turned it round for Charlie Parsons and co. But by saying I've done nothing, they could just say, oh, yeah, we got this weird bloke from the north, stuck it. Everyone hated him, but the show was a success despite him. And there was a touch of that about it. So I never got a kind of write-up about any other stuff I'd actually done. That was interesting.
Wow.
I got a reggae band signed by a major label in the mid-'80s. That's a gold medal. That's like managing a band getting to number one because of the racism in the system. And I remember that we got signed by Cool Tempo, Chrysalis. And when our second single came out, the first single got C-listed on Radio 1 and on Capital Radio. But they only pressed up like 5,000 copies of it. So it didn't even sell enough to get in the top 75. When the second single came out, we got offered the UB40 support tour for the UK, you know, Barrowlands in Glasgow, Birmingham NEC, Wembley in London. And it was a 10,000 quid buy-on, which is nothing. And they wouldn't give it us. And yet I found out of Kevin Godley, you know, ex-10cc, Manchester lad. I found out that he'd been able to spend 12,000 quid just to get one of the guys out of Go West's teeth straightened for the video. now there's a culture gap, isn't there? Yeah. But you know what you market between what gets spent on a black artist and a white artist, and I hate Go West to this day. I didn't rate them anyway. You know what I mean?
Did you ever get to go out on the piss with any of the bands after recording or anything like that? Was that a thing?
Well, I mean, really, I was actually out last week with Sean and Bez at the Pride of Manchester Awards, sitting on a table with them two and Peter Hook. And I remember like thinking, I took my lad, you know, because I'm kind of sad and single in my old age. But so I took my oldest lad, who's 25, and and I got this photo of him with like Sean and Bez. They were all on our table and Peter Hook. And I just thought, God, this table would have been carnage 30 years ago. But you know, now it's off it. But I mean, obviously, you know, because I knew all the guys in the bands in Manchester, and you know, so we'd always have a drink after the Word because the
How about the other bands that came over, like the American bands and stuff? Did they?
Well, again, you'd speak to them and stuff, you know, throughout the day, but they wouldn't always hang around because they didn't tend to be drinkers, and they'd always have, you know, they'd be over here and like be doing a gig every single night. So the American bands had a proper work ethic because they weren't already established. So their thingy was like gig. There was no time for hanging around. I mean, you know, you see him in the day and chat to him in the day, but it's like, you know,
who was the nicest guest out of a musical guest? I
don't know really. I mean, most of them were all right. I can't really think, you know, because again, the music guests were busy, you know, kind of rehearsing and this, that, and the other, you know what I mean? And just then they'd sort of hide in the dressing room, or else, actually, funny enough, Nirvana did hang around a lot in the canteen because on the show with them was a band from Manchester called Interstellar. And in
Yeah,
some
I
ways,
remember them.
they were a bit unlucky because I think maybe if they'd have come on with their next single, it would have been a better one. And I can't, if they'd have come on doing Dreams from Paradise or something like that, would have been much catchier, would have been a better tune. I think we got them on too soon. And what happened was when they arrived, like a runner went to meet them and went, "Are you Nirvana?" And he said, "Yeah." Just joking, and they got taken to Nirvana's dressing room, and they were very much on the up and up. So they had all like sushi, didn't he? And all like posh stuff and a big flash dressing room. So they tucked into it all. So Nirvana were like spent a lot of the day in the canteen at Limehouse in Wembley, drinking cups of coffee and moaning that someone had ate all their sandwiches and their sushi. Not very rock and roll, is it? I remember talking to what is it? Is it Danuta out of L7?
Donita Sparks, yeah.
Donita,
yeah.
Because she stuck around and was having a drink and everything. But she thought she'd done something amazing. And I was going, mate, that sort of crap happens on this show every week.
Dropping her trousers, yeah. I mean,
we've all seen one of them before.
Moment, though. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, if you're a kid, I mean, it was kind of.
It's great.
I mean, I talk about it. I did the James O'Brien podcast, Full Disclosure, and I was saying I was sort of so damaged in a way growing up that I was unshockable anyway. It's like people say, "Weren't you shocked when this happened?" I go, "Mate, I saw someone get stabbed when I was 11.
Yeah,
I've seen so many horrible things. That someone dropping the keks or saying that blah, blah, blah is the best fuck in the world is not going to horrify me in any way.
Yeah. Biggest twat? Who was the biggest twat?
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to come and see my show for that kind of
okay,
stuff.
Go. Don't give it away. All right. That's fine. Can I ask about a couple of my own personal favorite performances?
Yeah, of course.
Which I remember as if they happened like yesterday.
Yeah.
The first one I thought of when I knew I was going to be interviewed was the Manic Street Preachers doing repeat, just Nikki and Richie just looking beautiful and just shouting, fuck Queen and country. It seemed like subversive to my 14-year-old brain, hearing that on the telly.
They would have seemed subversive to your 13-year-old brain or maybe even your 12-year-old brain had we got them on at the right time. And they're the reason why we parted ways with the first music producer on The Word, a guy called Tim Byrne, who went on rightly. Actually, he was a Leeds lad, but he went on rightly to manage Steps and A1 and be big buddies with Simon Cowell. And that was a level. And he was trying to be very patch protective and didn't want certain groups on. So, and I remember even when we were interviewing the Happy Mondays in LA, and he was there, because he had to overlook it as a music, and he was saying, "Listen," and they were insisting they wanted to be interviewed on this beach, Zuma Beach, out in Irving County, which is about a 45-minute drive away, rather than in the studio, because they wanted to get out of the studio and have smoke a few spliffs on the beach. And he was going, "Listen, if you don't do it, we won't be having them on the show." And I just said to Nathan, I said, "Fuck him, he won't have a say in that." You know what I mean? He won't be having a say in that. We will be having him on the show, and we did do him on the beach. But I wanted to get Manic Street Preachers on doing Motown Junk. And he told me they weren't available. And I thought, listen, we were quite a big show by then. It was like halfway through series 1. We'd moved to 11 o'clock at night. We were having guests like Whitney Houston on live and stuff. And he forgot that my ex-missus, my then girlfriend, was one of the top pluggers to radio and TV in the country. So she knew everyone. So I rang her and I said, "Oh, God, I want to get Manic Street Preachers on with doing Motown Junk, but, he said they're not available." I said, "But I don't trust him." So she went and rang their record company and the manager. They go, "Oh, they'd love to do it." You know what I mean? So I exposed him, and he got the vote at the end of that series. So that's the Manic Street Preachers story.
That's a great one for me. Another one was Censor, and we had Hatham on the podcast recently. But just seeing this guy with a shaved head and his top off, this kind of mixed heritage British guy, and like all the boy girl vocals and the different sounds, it was it's pretty thrilling. As again, just to my teenage brain, you know.
I mean, again, if there was a buzz about someone or they were doing like really good gigs, we'd get them on. And some, you know, there was that weird things. I remember us having Buffalo Tom on, and it was like we just didn't have another band that week. And Joe Wiley just said, "Should we have them on or them?" And I went, "Them." She said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I like the record, you know, Treehouse." So they came on doing that, and then when we'd have, you know, even bands like Mega City 4 on, Teenage Fan Club, you know, and they were on the same show. And I'll never forget, like, the Melody Maker and the NME both came down that night, and they were interviewing Mega City 4 about me. And it was like, well, how can you stand to go on a show with him? Like, I'd done anything, do you know what I mean? But it's just this, you know, it was weird. It was kind of a complete sort of misportrayal. And then they were going. Then they were going. We said to Terry, "Why'd you get Mega City 4 on?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. I thought they might be quite good." I said, and then we asked him, "Who's the other band on?" I said, and he said, "Well, some Scottish band I've never heard of." Right. So I'd never heard of Teenage Fan Club. It was been album of the week on my radio show about 6 months earlier. But it was that kind of snideness you'd always get. I'm trying to think the other kind of guitar bands. I mean, obviously Rage Against the Machine, but I wasn't there that week.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was Mark Lamar doing it. I was away doing an outside broadcast.
Were you there for the Lemonheads? That was another memorable one for me. Doing Mrs. Robinson.
Well, we went to see him doing a lunchtime gig that day at Ronnie Scott's. So they did like a showcase gig. Funny enough, Evan Dando ended up going out for a little while with Noel Gallagher's ex, Louise Jones, in Manchester.
Is that right?
Hanging out there, yeah. God, the Lemonheads. I mean, they ended up being sort of 5-minute wonders, really, and yet they were supposed to be really big forever, weren't they?
Not in my brain. They're still there. They're still there for me.
Yeah, but do you know what I mean? It was like that. Yeah, they were so huge at the time. The Lemonheads, Evan Dando, and then we'd have. I think we had. Did we have Garbage on? We had a lot of bands on early, you know. So we had like Reef on. I mean, we even had Ocean Colour Scene on one of the very first shows.
Oh, right, that's early for them. Yeah.
Since Back to the Planet, we had a lot of those kind of you know, those sort of convoy type bands. And then I was bumping into all the guys of the local dropouts from Thames Poly when I was a kid. You know, at things like Back to the Planet, and I'm trying to think what's another similar sort of band that we had on at the time. And it was quite funny, you know, you're bumping into these guys that you knew from, you know what I mean, smoking weed when you were like 18, 19, you know, in southeast London.
Yeah.
You know, that was their tip.
Yeah. The other one I remember is, I mentioned it before, but Cypress Hill was a big one for me. I guess like Sendog with his bucket hat pulled right down.
Yeah, insane in the brain.
It's just so good. Every indie kid had that Black Sunday album, right? For some reason. Well,
it was, I mean, again, it was one of those weird things. I remember Tony Wilson, you know, in the Factory era, talking about indie dance crossover. And I was like looking at him going, mate, you know, there was only ever two genres of music, good and bad. So, you know, we were Buzzcocks fans, but we loved Earth, Wind and Fire. You know, we loved Bob Marley. We loved, you know, we loved Dennis Brown. We loved, like, you know, all sorts of stuff. You know, we liked Lou Reed at the time. You know, I mean, I still love Lou Reed, but it's kind of one of those, you know, the genre thing doesn't happen in city centres, really, because you hear so much stuff. You know, and you borrow records off your mates, and they want you to know it's good. I mean, funnily enough, our Tony was in the same you know, year as Rob Gretton out of you know, Managed New Order thing, and Gretton was a bit of an Northern Soul lad, but the albums he lent our Tony were like Captain Beefheart and King Crimson. Bit much. Doesn't sound good on a mono dance set, does it?
No. I dare say. We'll let you go soon. Can't believe it's gone that quickly. I just wanted to ask, you're pretty active on Twitter these days. You're pretty vocal in your criticism of the government and everything. I mean, what's your take on all of that?
I mean, really, I should be getting on with other work. It's a bit like doodling in the margin. I get sucked, you know. I mean, I've had therapy. I get sucked into it. I'm easily triggered. You know, I'm the fourth of 6 kids, big Irish family. You know, I'd walk a mile for a decent argument. So things like, and I love annoying people as well, which is a terrible trait. I do love to wind them up. I mean, that's something I did on Damon Albarn out of Blur. You know, many years later. I went up to him and said, listen, I'm probably your biggest fan, you know, because we had Blur on the Word like 3 times, you know, and they did
Yeah.
Girls and Boys way before it came out on the Word. And I went, oh, look, you know, Common People's my favourite ever song. My favourite song of yours is Common People. Just a bit. I was drunk. What can I do? You know what I mean? But yeah, you know, I mean, we had quite good fun, but it was intense. But there were always great parties after the Word. So when the Word finished, we had a proper after-show party where the bar would be open to like 3:30 in the morning, and you know what I mean. And people would get messy in there. It was quite funny.
Yeah, I guess that doesn't happen these days, eh?
Yeah, I mean, not that many fights. You get the odd punch up would happen, but yeah, good. You know.
Do you think that kind of Sepultura? Yeah, man, that was amazing. Yeah, yeah. Do you think that kind of anarchic TV would happen again? Do you think?
I did want to control it. I mean, one of the strange things about the Word is they've tried to recreate it so many times, but obviously I bought a certain ingredient into it because I bought 8 years of experience. And so I would take chances with, you know, where I wouldn't mind looking bad because I think, well, it's a show. That's the nature of the show. And to make this pile of crap work where you've got someone eating a worm butty, I hated that strand, by the way. You know, I said, but, you know, you've got to kind of not take it too seriously. And really, you know, the appeal to like anyone young watching it is the idea of a night out. It's not about trying to be cool or trendy. Well, I mean,
all right, we're going to let you go, Terry. You've been,
all right, cheers
more
for
than generous with your time. Is there anything you want to say to the listeners? Anything you want to
come and watch the stand-up gig? Come and watch the stand-up gig with all some of your favourite clips in the Word. You know what I mean? And it's on a big screen. So we're taking it everywhere.
All right, thanks so much for your time. Thank you.
Hey, cheers.
We'll let you know when it comes out. Cheers, mate. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, see you. Bye.
So there we go. Terry Christian of the Word, and not just the Word, but Terry Christian. I wasn't actually involved in the interview, but good job as always, lads. It's a good interview. I didn't realise there was obviously some tension between Terry Christian and the producers on which bands to book. And I think he wanted more of a say in it than he actually seemed to get in the end. And I think it sounded like he got a bit.
I think it was right from the beginning, not just at the end. I found that really interesting. So, like, when I asked him, like, you know, you had all these people on super early, and you know, he was like, "Well, yeah, that's what I do. You know, he spent the last 8 years on the radio doing this kind of show, getting up and coming bands, and he won 2 Sony Awards for it. You know, it wasn't a coincidence that they got these bands on early. That's what he was good at. That's what his thing was. You know,
it sounds like he didn't really get a lot of the credit for that. He was just this presenter that a lot of people, not to say didn't like, but I think he got quite a bit of bad press back at the time. And yeah, it doesn't seem like it was really his fault. It was more sort of he was thrown into this show that he wanted to go in a different direction.
Well, he said, right? Like, he gave 2 examples. Like, he gave the example of the Manics. He said they should have had them on much earlier, and they kind of lied to him and fought against it. And he said he was trying to get like Oasis on like 6 weeks before even for that. But well, one, they didn't have the record out, and then the producers were kind of fighting against him. So yeah, he was, you know, he seemed to be really good at that. That's his thing, you know, picking up on bands early, which is great.
I'm obviously biased now because we spoke to him, but I do tend to side with him, and I can believe that, you know, he had skill and actually earned that job.
Oh yeah.
Some of those others just slipped into those jobs, didn't they?
Yeah, because I forgot to mention before the interview, the guy who came up with the word, it was the same guy that did The Big Breakfast, which I didn't realise. When you've got a producer that's interested in, obviously they've got to be interested in viewing figures, blah, 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 blah. And you've got someone else who's fiercely passionate about music and obviously knows much more about music than the producers do, then there's going to be a little bit of friction, right?
And I guess the producers, to them, it wasn't just a music show, was it? It was an entertainment show. You know, they would dredge the bottom of the barrel for entertainment.
for ratings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they were just lucky that they had Terry Christian, to be honest, because the words become synonymous with those bands, right? And those performances, which they probably wouldn't have had without Terry Christian. So
that's right.
You know.
Yeah, I thought it's so interesting that he said, he made sure there was at least one black act on every week.
Yeah,
that
yeah, it was really sort
that
of.
was really interesting, and it was a deliberate thing by him. And
Yeah.
given the gender balance and stuff, that was really, I hadn't even thought about that. It was really interesting.
I'll go back to the whole interview thing. I think the interviews were kind of thrown together by the production company, and it kind of, I don't think the interviews got much respect because it was more about the actual bands that were on the show that people watched it. The interviews were like an afterthought sort of thing.
Or they would try to do something clever and funny, instead of like actually sitting down and like getting a decent interview out of them. They tried to be like smug and fucking.
Yeah, but I think
the
Terry
piss.
Christian got a lot of the flack for that, where it's obviously just a choice by the production company to have these slapdash interviews, I think.
But I thought they were good. It's a long time ago, but I thought he did a good job.
I mean, he talked about it a lot, but I think there definitely was a lot of class bias in the media. There still is, of course.
Oh, yeah,
but I guess
that
back
is an
then
interesting
it was like
part.
even worse. The idea that you can't have two people with a Manchester accent on.
I'd forgotten about that in the interview. Yeah, that was really interesting. Yeah, so the production company was just full of what most production companies are full of, I guess, just sort of white middle-class men.
Not even middle class, like proper like public school boys.
I mean, going off on a bit of a tangent, but the guy who ran Fantasia, the rave company, was like a posh schoolboy. It might be, it's either Fantasia or one of the other ones. I can't remember, to be honest. I'm probably wrong. But one of the big rave companies, it was just, some rich, posh kid that saw that all these kids were into rave music and spotted an opportunity. Fair play, put on some great raves and stuff. But yeah, it is interesting how these things come about, right?
Yeah, I think the media's historically been kind of dominated by those kind of people, right? And I think it probably still is to.
It is all the jobs that people want to do. It's skewed, isn't it, massively in favour of nepotism and.
I guess there's always going to be a bit of friction there, isn't there, when you've got people that are passionately into something just because they're passionately into something, whereas the other side of it is, well, we've got to get viewing figures, and we can't just have your favourite bands on.
You've got to get, my friend's son has just graduated and needs a job. There's that part of it as well, right?
And when someone like Terry Christian actually does break through, they're kept in their place. There's always a foot resting on their heads to keep them down.
Yeah, I think
he wasn't allowed any
wasn't
power, was he, at all on that show?
No.
But he still managed to exert some, which is good.
Yeah.
He was there the whole 5 years. Other things I picked up on, it's just a small comment he made, but it really stuck with me, and I've been thinking about it ever since. He said something to the effect of, if 400 people congregate and dance in London, it's called a scene. If it happens in Manchester, it's a night out.
Yeah.
And that really, really struck with me, the idea that, London, all the journalism and stuff is kind of concentrated there. So they're so desperate to find like any kind of like new music movement that if there happens to be a few people that play slightly similar music, they suddenly declare there's like a whole new scene has been born. But it's not. It's just, some people listening to similar music, and part of that is this kind of desperate attempt to try to kind of prove that London is this like important city, when, as he said, it hasn't had a scene since punk. And that is a really, really kind of astute observation that only someone that knows a fuck of a lot about music kind of could make. And he kind of tossed it aside, but it really, really stuck with me since the interview.
Yeah, that's another thing I got from the interview as well. That's a really good point. But that he does know a fucking lot about music, which is, it's great to have someone like that on the podcast. I think we were really lucky to get him on. Why do you think it's remembered so fondly by people from that generation? Because it is, like, everyone loved the word, didn't they? Everyone.
There wasn't anything like it before. It's been copied many times, but there's nothing like it before, I don't think.
Well, just the sheer breadth of the music. So whatever you were into the music of that time, they had them on, right? So there's loads of people in our Facebook group. There's loads of people that are into Mega City 4 and Senseless Things and all that, which is great. We love it. If you're into that, they were on, right? If you're more into grunge stuff, then you had Nirvana, and you had the Lemonheads, and you had whoever, Faith No More. So if you're into pop music, it was there. If you're into R&B, it was there. If you're into like hip hop, it was there. They had Gravediggers, they had Tricky, they had Public Enemy. Anything you were into, doesn't matter what kind of subculture you were into, they had something for you.
I think you could kind of soundtrack this podcast with the word. They kind of, because we talk about the two different music scenes going on at the same time, the grunge scene and the Grebo scene and all that sort of thing. The word just kind of had it all. They had grunge bands on with Grebo bands and all this sort of thing, right? It's all together in one place. I just like the spontaneity of the program. It was just all a bit mad, wasn't it? And I like that.
It felt anarchic. Sorry, Dave, go on.
Yeah.
The fact that it was live was important, and the music was important. But I think, if you think about it, in the 80s, Saturday morning, we were all watching Going Live and programs like that.
Fucking good Going Live.
Yeah. And the word was like Going Live, but for us, when we're older, it's a similar kind of show.
To Going Live?
Yeah. It was a...
I guess so.
It continued on.
I don't think Terry will really appreciate you comparing his in-depth knowledge of music with Going Live, but I get the comparison.
I know what you mean, though, Dave. I do. It was kind of like the next stage. You know what I mean? For an age that we grew into. Yeah.
Trevor and Simon on Going Live, they were more sort of adult, weren't they? Humour, really.
You know what? I heard a really good interview with them on Scroobius Pip's podcast recently. They were fucking good blokes. They were
really, man.
Really interesting. Yeah,
but that humour, it wasn't aimed at children, I don't think. Give us a famous line, Dave, from Trevor and Simon.
Well, I can't. I'm just thinking To Me, To You, but that's the Chuckle Brothers.
Yeah, that's wrong. Try again.
So you do it. Go on.
We don't do duvets.
That was a good impression. Well done.
Luke?
Well, no, because the only one I can think of, it kind of makes me cringe to say it, so I don't want to
So does mine, but I did it.
Go on.
No, yours is at least fun. I know, because I didn't like it. I'm going to say it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to...
do it.
No, I won't. I didn't like the swing your pants kind of riff they had. Well, I don't even remember. No, that's it. I just didn't like it.
That was good.
I can't. Dave,
even
you do it.
No, it makes me cringe. I wanted to talk a bit more about like the like I said, I tried to ask them about they tried to get like a gender balance on there. I was kind of looking through like the lists and stuff today. Some really, really, really good stuff. Do you remember Daisy Chainsaw? Do you remember them being on?
I
do.
Was
a great performance. Yeah,
I do remember them actually.
Belly, Throwing Muses, Christine Hirsch. Just, I don't know, just really good stuff.
For that to be really important to you, it just really shows how into music it was. But only important if you're really into something. It's not important if you're the producer of the show.
Oh man, I'm trying to find a band either that we've put out as an episode, or we've got coming out that wasn't on. I can't see the Levelers on my list.
They might not have been on it.
I don't remember them on it.
Comment below if you're in the Levelers or if you saw a Levelers. I don't think they were on it. You're right.
I just saw
Censor were on it, weren't they?
Censor were on it. That's one of my favourite performances.
Yeah, they're good.
Amazing. Compulsion were on it. Jesus Jones were on it.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
They were on show 8 of series 3.
Yeah, what about EMF? I bet I don't remember them.
They were on it. They did Unbelievable on it.
Fuck off, did they? I'll have to have a look.
They did. So you mentioned like Reef, who were like later on, right? Supergrass were on it. They were 95.
Oh, okay.
Oh, your favourite, Black Crows were on it at the season 5.
Oh, what? That can't have been Terry's doing.
Corrosion of Conformity, man. Proper metal on there. Dog Eat Dogs, remember them? That was great.
It's quite amazing how many bands they had on there. Like whenever I have a look for music to share on our Facebook page, they're always Word performances, pretty much, or Top of the Pops, but mainly the Word ones are always the best performances.
And some of it's amazing. You get like two amazing bands on the same. So Oasis were on the same as Soul Asylum.
Oh, Soul Asylum, yeah, somebody should shove.
Populi itself were on the same as Cypress Hill and Smashing Pumpkins. Oh wow, all three on the same show.
Man, it's nuts,
That's
isn't it?
incredible. Let me finish off my biography of Terry. So since then, basically he's been still like writing loads of columns, doing loads of radio. Recently been on MasterChef. I think, is that right?
Yeah, I forgot he was on MasterChef.
So I don't know.
Yeah, he was. I think he did quite well.
I think he's going on Mastermind, or he's been on Mastermind. Is that right?
Right. So he's got a penchant for programs that start with Master.
Basically, and he's very active on Twitter. So if you're not following him on Twitter,
He is.
I definitely recommend it. It's mainly like calling out the Tories for being fucked.
Pretty much.
Kids. Yeah. And he's on tour talking about the word. It's like a stand-up tour. It's called like the Naughty Nut Word, the naughty 90s or something like that. I think we're a little bit late, but there's still a few dates left. So if you haven't missed him already and he's in your area, they look amazing shows. So yeah, go and see him.
Is it just him?
It's a really good
just
speaker.
Just him speaking about the word, pretty much.
Yeah, I think so, and showing clips and like giving some insights and stuff like that. So as you heard from the interview, he's a raconteur. So I can imagine he's really good. He's a really good person to go and see.
He'll have some stories, that's for sure.
He gave us a few good ones, but yeah.
Interesting guy for sure. Right, okay, so if you're listening to this, then please do remember to give it a rating or a review or both, so that it can get found by other people. If you're watching on YouTube, please remember to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below. Tell us your memories of the word and the performances on the word. Let's get a bit of a discussion going in the YouTube comments. Anyway, that's it for this episode.
Who have we got next week?
Mega City 4?
Mega City 4. Although, we've only got one of them. It's only Mega City 1.
Yeah, but it's a Mega City 4 special. Come on then, Dave. Let's wrap this one up. Let's bring this baby home.
We'll see you in a minute.